Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday to you. My name is Tim Harris, pastor at Woodburn Baptist Church. It's a gorgeous day, windy as everything, but we're together. We're in God's Word. I'm glad that you're with me. Thanks for joining me. Whether you're live on Facebook or YouTube, or you're joining me sometime later, stay with it and stay caught up and stay in the Word with me. We are finishing up the story of Isaac passing on his blessing to his sons, Jacob and Esau. We listened and read yesterday how Jacob has deceived his father Isaac by stealing the blessing by appearing to be his brother Esau. When we pick up now in verses 30 to 46, Genesis chapter 27, verse 30, you'll notice how it's just this, very narrow miss. They barely miss each other, but Isaac finishes the blessing of Jacob. Jacob, leaves, and then Esau comes in. It's a tragic kind of dim-witted kind of scene, and Esau is just portrayed as this, weak dimwit. He's all belly and no brain, and always just a little bit slow on the draw here. And so he comes in, do. He's been hunting and then he's cooked it, and now he comes in, to receive his father's blessing. And Isaac has these really just haunting words. Who are you? It's the very same words he used when he was talking to Jacob. Who are you, my son? It's this really strange kind of phrase, really, when you think about it. But who are you, my son? And he asks again. This time Esau says, it's your son. I'm Esau. And then Isaac, is like, well, then who was the kid that just left? So it's like, how can you not know? It's interesting, and the Hebrew language here in this scene is really interesting and very dramatic. There in verse 33, when it's New Living Translation said Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably. That the Hebrew there says that Isaac trembled a great tremble exceedingly. He trembled a great tremble. It's a very physical response to the shock and to the horrible tragedy of what's just happened. And then the next verse with Esau, when he hears his father's words, New Living Translation says he let out a loud and bitter cry, but the Hebrew says he cried an exceedingly bitter cry. He cried a cry. He trembled a tremble. It's just this, it's just, he cried and wailed. It's just extreme emotional response. And that's kind of funny in a way to get this from Esau now, because so far he hasn't seemed to want anything all that bad. He's the guy that traded off, his birthright, for a bowl of soup. And now all of a sudden, he's, coming apart. And it's almost like he doesn't really know what he had until he lost it. He didn't know what it was worth until it was gone. And now it's truly gone. So he's, Daddy, don't you have any kind of blessing left over for me? At this point, it's like crumbs. I'll take the crumbs. Is there anything that you didn't promise to Jacob? And Isaac, the truth is, no. I gave him the world. I blessed him the biggest blessing ever. And you'll notice there, what Esau receives here at the end is kind of an anti-blessing. It's the blessing, but it's just like the opposite of the blessing he gave to Jacob, which means it's not much of a blessing at all. Can we just, a couple of questions I just want to raise here and just talk about families for a second. First off, my big question here, and it's just an honest question, does the success of Jacob's cunning here, does it suggest God's approval? I know that from the very beginning, God has known that Jacob would take Esau's place, and God's going to bless his family, and God's going to use his family. I don't know if I would, but God is so merciful and God is so great. It's just that sense of, I don't think God's approving of all of this, but it's just so complicated the way that God's going to work through it. Also, just another kind of question from me is Isaac as ignorant as he seems? Because part of me just doesn't think he is. The hands are Esau's, but the voice is Jacob's. How dumb is he? I don't know how dumb he is. And now the whole, I blessed him, so he's blessed. It's like, really? I don't quite understand, and I can't quite get a feel for is Isaac as blind and dumb as he seems. I honestly just don't know. But just kind of as we leave this passage, I want you to think a minute about families, because this is an ordinary family. I mean, there's one thing we can all agree on: this is an ordinary family. It is so ordinary that you almost think, how is God going to use them? How is Jacob going to be Israel, the father of God's people? It's just amazing at this point that God continues to have patience with them, and yet God continues to have patience with us all. This is just a family, though. It's just a family, and I just want you to see that. It's a family in transition. And I think this is coming from just a lifetime in ministry at this point, and having worked with a lot of families. Families are tested in times of trial, but especially transition. A family can kind of cruise along for a long time. Things seem to be going pretty well. You got problems, right? But they don't really cause problems until the time of transition. In this case, Isaac is passing away. He's on his deathbed. He's dying, and the boys are coming of age. They're reaching that point of manhood, and they're getting married and leaving home, and that's a really difficult transition. And you just wonder what in the world's going to be left between Isaac and Rebekah when the boys are gone, because man, she got her son and he's got his son, and this whole scene here, I think it's interesting. It's this one big story of the passing of the blessing, and you got 4 characters, but you never see more than 2 in a conversation at the same time. This family doesn't connect. This family is dysfunctional in so many ways, and this transition brings out the dysfunction. And the same thing is true in your family. There aren't any perfect families. Some are, perhaps more functional than others, but when your family has to go through a transition, when you got to bury grandma, or when you got to let go, that's when sometimes you wish the family could pull it together and be more functional, but they don't. It's coming from a guy who preaches weddings and funerals for a living. You would think, man, surely they can get it together for one day, but some families just can't. The fact that it's a transition, the fact that it's a big day, it doesn't mean that people are going to suddenly be able to function, to behave. The other question here is, Isaac's a patriarch, why doesn't their religion seem to help them? They're still resorting to deception and favoritism and, this incredible, out of control emotion. There's just so much here, and it's like, why doesn't their religion seem to help? And I'd say the same thing for some of your families, probably, if I knew you, and you probably say the same thing about mine. If family members aren't intentionally seeking the Lord, it doesn't matter how religious you are. It doesn't matter how religious the family is. If you haven't been to church since Christmas, or some of you, since the beginning of COVID, it doesn't really matter how religious you think you are if you're not actually seeking the Lord. And I don't care what you say at this point, man. I know God's going to work in this family, and this is the beginning, not the end of the story. But right now in this story, I don't see anybody seeking the Lord. That they're seeking what's in it for them. They're seeking themselves. And you know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter how religious you are if you're not seeking the Lord. I guess one other thing here, I would just say, you got to deal with the molehills before they're mountains. We've known since, forever that there is favoritism in this family, that this family was divided, that Rebekah had her favorite boy and Esau had his favorite boy. And man, there are issues here, but they haven't dealt with them. And the fact that they don't deal with them means it's just going to come back to bite them in big ways. The molehills are going to become mountains. Now at the end of the story, you have Esau saying, I can't wait till my daddy's dead so I can kill my brother. What? What? Can't wait till my father's dead so I can just kill my brother. That's what Esau says at the end. I know that's extreme, but I'm just saying, notice this here at the end of this family just comes apart in all the ways a family can come apart. And yes, God's going to bless them, and God's going to use them, and God can still bless your family, and God can still use your family. But I'm just saying, it doesn't have to come to this. I'm just, right now, you just got to stop pretending not to know what is broken. And you got to stop pretending not to know what needs to be fixed in your family. You got to stop pretending not to know what you know. Daddy drinks too much. Mama spends too much. I mean, this family is broken, and you have to stop pretending that it's not the case. So at the end of this, family just scatters. Jacob has to flee to, Rebecca's family. And she's glad because that means he's going to, hopefully get a good wife. And Esau's got these Hittite women. And I mean, it's just, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad for a long, long time. And at the end of this, man, they're just gone or scattered. Can't wait till daddy's dead. I'll kill my brother. I guess the bottom line of this is, the time to get serious about your family is now. The time to seek the Lord for your families now. And I'll say a little thing. This comes from Andy Stanley. Andy Stanley says that you have to create a family that loves to be together, so that when they don't have to be together, they still want to be together. They still choose to be together. You know what I mean? And this is just his family. Esau's gone. And who knows when we'll see him again. Jacob's gone. He can't come home again. And you know what I mean? Right now, some of you are still raising young kids. I'm just saying right now, your goal is to create a family that wants to be together, kids that want to be with you, because one day they won't have to be with you, and you want them to, at that point, choose to be with you. You know what I'm saying? You have to do that now. If you don't get that now while you have kids in the house, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to get that later. You got to raise a family that loves each other and wants to be together, so that when nobody has to be together, they would choose to be together. You know what I'm saying? Transitions are going to test your family. Anyway, we'll pick up right here tomorrow, chapter 28. Honestly, the story doesn't really end at the end of chapter 27. It sort of spills over into chapter 28. But we will do all of chapter 28 tomorrow, verses 1 to 22, okay? Sorry, I went long today. I love you guys so much. Have a good Wednesday. Don't let the wind blow the color out of your hair, okay? Don't let the wind blow your wig off. And say the word. I'll see you in the morning, Lord willing, 10 o'clock for 10 with Tim.